Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Codit webinar. Today's topic is all about the future of your integration solution and what's next for Microsoft BizTalk server. Your host for today is Michel Pauwels. Michel is our integration architect, and he has been working on various projects across different industries and across different countries. With his knowledge and his know-how, he is your best man for today. Now, before we get started, just a practical thing. Should you have any questions during this webinar, please use the Q&A tool on this webinar, and Michel will take the time to answer these at the very end of this webinar. With that said, over to you, Michel.
Thank you for the introduction, Francis. It is no secret that Microsoft is heading towards a hybrid or cloud-only approach for the future of its integration solution. There is a continuous focus on the Azure integration services, while the support for BizTalk Server 2013 and R2 is coming to an end in 2023. If your business is still using BizTalk Server, now is the time to start planning for the future of your integration solution. I will try and fill you in with everything you need to know about life after BizTalk Server. I will give you a timeline with some key events that your business needs to prepare for, migrating options including extending support, migrating to Azure integration services, or maybe even upgrading to BizTalk Server 2020. We will also take a look at what are your options for leveraging the cloud capabilities of BizTalk 2016 and 2020, and I will address some of the pros and cons of these various options. I will also end with some extra considerations that you should take for important factors like how can you connect to these current on-premise systems from a cloud perspective, or if you're staying on-prem, together with all the API connectivity challenges that also come with them. Microsoft provides you with some set lifecycle policies, and these lifecycle policies give you as the customer a consistent, transparent, and predictable guideline for your software support and servicing. Most of the products that we are using in a BizTalk platform environment are applied to the fixed lifecycle policy. This fixed lifecycle policy will provide you with a defined support and servicing lifecycle timeline at the time that the product is launched. It will give you a minimum of 5 years of mainstream support, followed by an additional period of extended support for some of the products that they offer. Typically, the products will have 5 years of mainstream support, followed by 5 years of extended support, and some exceptions may, of course, apply here. When a product reaches the end of the mainstream support phase, customers will no longer be able to receive non-security updates or make requests to changes to the product design and new features. When a product reaches the end of the extended support phase, the product has reached the end of life status. So in most situations, Microsoft will provide you with a minimum of 10 years of support. In some products, you also have minor releases. These minor releases will always follow the same lifecycle as the major product release. An example of this is Windows Server 2012 R2, which has the same mainstream and extended support phase as the parent product, Windows Server 2012. Likewise, BizTalk Server 2013 R2 follows the same lifecycle dates as the initial release of BizTalk Server 2013. We have all these different lifecycle phases, but what is included in every one of them? Your mainstream support includes incident support, which can be no charge incident support, paid incident support, support charged on an hourly basis, or support for warranty claims. It will also include you security update support and the ability to request extra non-security updates or changes to the product. After this initial phase of mainstream support, the product moves on to the extended support phase. Here, you still enjoy paid support and security updates at no extra cost. Non-security updates are only available for a select group of products. In this extended support phase, there will be no warranty support, no more design changes or new features that will come out for the products in extended support. It is also possible for some products that an enrollment in a paid support program may be required to receive these benefits. And at the end of the cycle, a product reaches the end of life. In here, several programs like SQL Server and Windows Server still get some security updates via the Extended Security Update program. This is either a paid option or you have to move to Azure VM's infrastructure as a service to receive this for free. It is very important for the enterprise scene to get commitment from their server software that it will be supported for a very long time. However, all good things must come to an end. BizTalk Server 2020 is Microsoft's commitment to existing customers who invested in BizTalk Server and to future customers that the product will be supported until 2030. However, the Azure Integration Services vision is to enable all of these customers to move to a modern, holistic, and rich integration platform as a service that can meet the challenges of all their integration workloads, both today and in the future, wherever they reside, whether on-premise or completely in the cloud. Let's start by taking a look at BizTalk itself. BizTalk 2010 ended support in the beginning of this year. So if you're still running this version, it is certainly time to consider one of the paths I'll be outlining in a moment. We are currently May 20th, 2021, and we still have support for several upcoming versions. The mainstream support for BizTalk 2016 will be ending at the end of this year, as explained before, and this means that from then on, only security updates will be coming out and no more new features. The next version to really reach this end of life status will be BizTalk Server 2013 and its corresponding R2 version. Support will end mid-2023, and if you're running this version, you still have a little time to properly consider your next step. At the beginning of 2024, the mainstream support of BizTalk 2020 will come to an end, and customers on this version, while you still have some time left, I am still glad that you're attending this webinar. After 2024, things will become a little bit more critical, with the BizTalk 2016 ending support in 2027 and BizTalk 2020 ending support in 2029. Since no new versions are announced at the moment, we have to assume that this is the timeline we're working with for BizTalk Server. Since BizTalk is only a piece of your entire software puzzle, it is important to take a look at the entire platform setup to see if you are still being supported. Certainly in this day and age of ransomware attacks, using unsupported or unpatched software could spell disaster for your data. While the attack surface of just BizTalk might be quite small, both Windows Server and SQL Server are more prime targets. First, let's take a look at the current Windows Server versions that are supported by the BizTalk versions that are not yet end of life. Last year, Server 2008 R2 went into end of life status, and this is the lowest supported version for BizTalk 2013. If you are running this version of Windows Server, then you could be potentially vulnerable, even though the BizTalk server that you are running is still supported. Best case scenario is, of course, running BizTalk 2013 on the corresponding Windows Server 2012 version. Even then, you don't have a lot of time to spare, with the end of life status coming in July for BizTalk and October for Windows 2023. Customers running BizTalk 2016 and 2020 on the latest supported versions of Windows Server 2016 and 2019 respectively, won't have any concerns, with the only gap being if you are running a BizTalk 2020 server on a Windows Server 2016, because BizTalk 2020 will be end of life after Windows Server 2016, which it can run on, will be end of life. The next piece of the puzzle, of this platform puzzle, is SQL Server. Customers running BizTalk 2013, the non-R2, will certainly encounter an unsupported scenario, since both supported SQL versions for BizTalk 2013 will go into the end-of-life status before the BizTalk version is unsupported. It has about 1 year to spare. The next end-of-life will be SQL Server 2014, which will end in 2024, a year after its corresponding BizTalk server version, 2013 R2, is ending support. Here a gap occurs again when you're running BizTalk 2016 and 2020, because their supported SQL versions, 2014 and 2016, and before the support for these BizTalk versions will end. So keeping all this in consideration, the only time that your BizTalk server will be completely supported until after the end of life of the most recent supported platform will be a BizTalk 2013 R2 on a Windows Server 2012 R2 with a SQL Server 2014, or a BizTalk 2020 on a Windows Server 2019 with a SQL Server 2019. These are all things that you have to keep in mind while looking at your support lifecycle for your integration platform, that it's not just the BizTalk server to look at. You have to take a look at all the underlying components as well. So it is clear that preparing and planning for the future of your integration platform is a must. Depending on the exact scenario you are in, you have several paths available. Next up, I will now go over these paths, giving you some pros and cons for each of them, which will hopefully help you take the correct decision. The first path to consider is just sticking with what you know, but upgrading it to the latest and greatest version of Windows, SQL, and BizTalk. Upgrading your environment to a newer supported version of BizTalk will allow you to keep running your integrations with minimal or no changes to your applications. There are a few deprecations and removals of adapters between the versions, but in most scenarios, running a simple recompile and redeploy, especially when using tools like the BizTalk deployment framework or the Invictus framework from Codit, is all that is needed. You will still get support from Microsoft, especially when upgrading to their latest support platform. You will also retain all your current in-house knowledge of your developers. The downside of this scenario is that it's always best to do these kind of upgrades by setting up a completely separate new environment and not by performing an in-place upgrades, meaning that you will temporarily have to maintain, and the corresponding license costs, both environments until the upgrade is completed. Eventually, again, your support will end and you will have to reconsider the path to take. While backwards compatibility should be possible, everything will have to be retested to resolve any potential issues. These issues could be connectivity between the new environment and whatever systems that you have, weird side scenarios, or maybe any unsupported adapters that were changed that need to be retested. This path is only really applicable, or should be considered at least, for BizTalk 2010 and 2013 R2 customers. Taking a more passive approach to the future, while not always a good idea, is also a possibility. You will just depend on the support from Microsoft a little longer while thinking about your next steps for the future, while also being able to prepare better for the future. Just like with the upgrade path, the pros are straightforward. You are still supported by Microsoft. You don't have to do any changes, just make sure that everything remains updated and supported. You will also not lose any of your current knowledge. While you don't need a new environment, like with the upgrade path, you will only receive security and paid upgrades when in this extended support scenario. And that might, as I mentioned previously, come with an additional cost. If you're running BizTalk 2010, this scenario is not an option at all for you because the end of life status for that product has been reached. Going down this path is applicable when you're currently running an environment which is completely fine and on which you can depend on the support of Microsoft and their partners. Whether this support is mainstream or extended, doesn't matter, you are supported. This will allow you to keep your peace of mind for a bit longer, have a better planning, and then go down either one of the following paths that I will present. With two offerings, BizTalk and Logic Apps, both capable of running on-premises and in Azure, many customers will be evaluating a migration from BizTalk Server to Logic Apps. The first of the more future-proof paths is the migration path. While you are keeping your current environment running, you are creating a new environment, but instead of with BizTalk as a driving force, with all the Azure integration services like API management, Logic Apps, Service Bus, and Event Grid. You prepare yourself for the future of integration by migrating your applications to Azure integration services. The advantages are clear. You're best prepared for the future by moving towards cloud technologies. It will come, and it is inevitable that if you want to be supported, you will have to move to the Azure integration services. Migrating to a new environment and technology will also allow you to take a good look at how you've implemented your current integrations, and all those optimizations and refactoring tickets that have been on the backlog since 2010 can be picked up. Another advantage, courtesy of using the cloud, is that it's typically consumed as a service, allowing you as the customer more flexibility to offset those hard costs of a traditional integration platform. Where the previous paths are not applicable to all scenarios, this path is. Of course, switching to a new technology comes with a learning curve. While the integration patterns and the integration tools that you are using, for example, for customers using the Invictus framework, remain the same when you are migrating to the cloud, there is a slight learning curve that will come with it. Additionally, the process of rewriting also takes time. Depending on your current situation, this might not be what you have, so you might have to take action immediately if you want to keep your support going. Just like with the upgrade path, you have to temporarily support two environments with the additional downside that they will be in completely different technologies. However, an advantage of the migration path over the upgrade path is that the infrastructure here is not a cost because you are consuming cloud services if you are going for a completely cloud approach. This path is maybe the most applicable to customers currently running BizTalk 2016 that don't want to go down the support path, depending on the size of your environment and maybe that the integrations that you are running. Switching to a new technology stack might come as a daunting and scary task. You just installed or upgraded to a shiny new BizTalk Server 2020 version. So why would you want to change? Well, as I said before, the change is coming. It is inevitable that in the future, you will have to use the Azure integration services. By keeping your current integration platform and then simultaneously developing and running new integrations in Azure integration services, you will be able to take small baby steps towards this future. An advantage of this is that you are not doing a big bang migration. At first, you will just gain the knowledge about this new technology, learn the best practices and patterns that you will need to develop these new integrations. After which, you will be able to put this knowledge to good use by migrating your existing applications and doing even more optimizations and refactorings than you would just go for it and try to look and see what is best. Experience is something that's invaluable when developing software. So by using the hybrid approach, you can gain this experience for when you are doing your big migration afterwards. Additionally, you will be able to extend your BizTalk environment to the cloud, allowing you to make use of all those connectors that the Azure integration services offer you through Logic Apps. One way of doing this is by having BizTalk communicate with Logic Apps through a service bus or through a service bus with Azure Function Apps. Everything keeps running and you have a new application in the cloud or a new integration in the cloud, and the communication between the two is perfectly possible by using a service bus. The disadvantages of this scenario are also pretty obvious. You need to keep the end of life status of your current environment in mind. So this is not a solution or a path that will last forever. You again have to support two technology stacks at the same time. A few years ago, this solution would be applicable to both BizTalk 2016 and BizTalk 2020 customers. But with the mainstream support for BizTalk 2016 ending next year, this is now mostly advisable for BizTalk 2020 customers for the next 2 years, or customers who want to take extended support for their 2016, get to know the technology, and then move. With all these different paths, choosing the right one depends on many factors. The support phase in which your software currently resides, the complexity of your environment, the size of your integration team that is available, the cost, and many of the others. While there is no clear-cut answer, it is possible to maybe pick a preferred path. I have written down some of these my personal preferred paths that I would take depending on the BizTalk version, but these are certainly not set in stone. If you're running BizTalk 2010, your support has ended, and the quickest way to get back in a supported scenario would be an upgrade and afterwards immediately get up to speed with the Azure integration services in a hybrid scenario. This will give you until 2024 to get to know AIS and then perform a migration of all your remaining applications. BizTalk 2013, this will depend on the Windows server that you're running. Consider upgrading then the hybrid and a migration path as well if you are running on the older Windows Server 2008 R2. If you have time left, and you want to go for a migration, you can do that if you can have it finished by July 2023 when you are running on the latest 2012 server version. 2013 R2, because of the dependency on Server 2012, Windows Server 2012 as well, gives you a bit more breathing room. So here, the migration path is something to be considered as well. 2016, with the mainstream support ending in 2022, doesn't give you a lot of time for a good migration if you have a big environment, but for small ones, certainly go for this migration approach. If you have a big environment with a lot of variables, with a lot of different applications, go for the extended support, get to know the technology, and then migrate eventually. Potentially, you will be able to migrate everything before the extended support phase has ended. If you are running the latest and greatest version, BizTalk 2020, you're good for now, and you can start learning all the ins and outs of Azure integration services, and then start a migration plan by moving everything away from BizTalk before this mainstream support will end in 2024. When going for the upgrade path, you can upgrade and your BizTalk environment, move all the applications to this upgraded environment, but all new functionality should primarily be done in the new technology stack, being Azure Integration Services. Unless there is absolutely no other way, because this will allow you to just gain that experience, gain those insights, get to know the tools, and also get you out of your comfort zone. As made clear previously, the future of the integration platform lies in these Azure Integration Services, with all paths ultimately ending in a migration, whatever your current situation is. You will have to invest in the correct training for these Azure Integration Services, something which we at Codit will be, of course, happy to assist you with. An integration platform is also not something standalone. Being the middleware, you are exactly there, in the middle of everything. Working together with our customers has allowed us to list up some of the common considerations that have to be taken into account when making a decision on which path to take, on whether to upgrade or migrate directly to the cloud. Middleware connects to other applications. So when deciding your middleware path, they have to be kept in mind as well. What will the future of these applications be? Will you upgrade to newer versions and stay on-premise, or will you move to their software as a service variants? I'm thinking about Dynamics. You have the on-premise version and you have the Dynamics 365. Having your integration platform where your application resides makes sense from a latency point of view and also from a connectivity point of view. How to connect to these applications will also depend on the choice of your integration platform as well. If you're connecting to on-premise applications from the cloud, you might need to do some extra network setup changes. Thinking about VNet integrations, on-premise data gateways, maybe opening up firewalls to call APIs directly. Another thing to consider for this connection to on-premise applications is the authentication method. Nowadays, if you are running BizTalk server, you are primarily using, I hope, Windows authentication to connect to Navision, to SQL, and any other services that you might have on-premise. When running from the cloud, this is not always an option. So you will have to change your authentication methods by going to basic authentication or API keys instead of just relying on Active Directory to do all your authorization. Lots of integration platforms depend on custom written in-house APIs as well. When moving to a cloud-based platform, these applications might be a prime candidate to migrate to Azure App Services or Function Apps as well. This will allow you to further lower your infrastructure and licensing costs because you won't have to maintain an extra web service infrastructure. Now, one of the concerns that you might be having is that BizTalk is currently an on-premise integration tool and that these Azure integration services, well, they run in the cloud. This is something that Microsoft was also aware of as well. And with the upcoming release of the Logic Apps V2, you will be able to have your processing where you need it, be that on-premise or in the cloud. This means that by using the Logic Apps V2, you will be able to replace your on-premise integration tool, BizTalk, with the one that's the same, whether it runs in the cloud or in your own infrastructure. The end game for this is that you will eventually have to invest in new training, both in these new Azure technologies and in running these Logic Apps, Function Apps in Kubernetes. These are technologies which your current BizTalk developers might not be familiar with, or they haven't even investigated them yet. It is important that training on this happens, both for the hybrid and migration paths. It is technically possible to run these flows directly using the runtime on-premise. It will be a recommendation to run everything on top of a Kubernetes cluster. This will allow you to just run your code anywhere without any big changes, and you can run these containers both on-premise as in the cloud. Eventually, you will have to migrate all your flows away to Logic Apps V2 or maybe even Function Apps. The last important thing to consider is, of course, your company culture. Do you have a vision of running everything on the latest technology? Then start your migration path right away. Do you want to run rock solid, stable technology? Go hybrid, mess around with these Logic Apps, and then see if everything runs as expected. Are you expecting your entire company, your entire software landscape to go to the cloud? Nothing is also stopping you from moving away from this on-premise infrastructure that you have at the moment. So we went over a few different paths and the options that are available to you for your future. The next step is, of course, deciding which path to take, assessing your current infrastructure, your culture, and your integrations. We can help you get off on the right foot with your Azure integration migration project by exploring and assessing your current on-premise integration infrastructure and systems, in which we will also identify the impacts and the complexities that an Azure integration migration project may have for your organization. And together with Codit, we will form a concrete plan of action towards the future of your IT ecosystem.